Grand Rising, everybody. How you doing? This is your Coach Renz, and welcome to Deconstructing Christianity with Coach Renz. I am he. I am that guy. I want to thank you guys for being here. As tonight we deconstruct Christianity. If you're new to this channel, finding us for the very first time, then what we do on this channel is the process of deconstructing Christianity for those people who have made that decision and those who are in the quest of deciding to walk away from this religion. We usually get started around the time frame that we get started is going to be in about 5 minutes. So 5 minutes from on the clock, and we will actually get started with tonight's conversation, the Joseph story. We're going to talk about this Joseph story and how Joseph ended up enslaving. Did Joseph enslave the Egyptians? Did Joseph create the very situation that caused the so-called Exodus? We're going to dive into that and look at the reality of where that story more than likely comes from and how it developed over time to become this biblical narrative. So we do a lot of history on this channel if you find this for the first time. What's up, Tim? Welcome to the show. Got to get my cigar lit so that we can enjoy this. I got a bit of a sore throat, but we're going to be all right. Got to get used to being here in Texas for my first year. Get used to some of the elements. Tim, I don't know who you calling your darling. Well, I can't take some of y'all nowhere. I hope you guys are ready. Hope you had a great weekend. So a few people signed up for the seminar that we will be having, the webinar that we're going to have on May the 4th. On May the 4th, we're going to have a webinar. It's going to last about 2 to 3 hours, most likely the full 3 hours on May 4th. That webinar will be taking a deep dive into the Noah's flood story. We're going to dissect the hell out of it. Dissect the different myths that came before it. We're going to dissect the science of its improbability and impossibility. So we are going to dissect it. And even from a biblical reference, we will dissect the flood story. Because as I've said before, if the Bible can't stand, if the flood story is untrue, the Bible can't stand. Exodus is untrue, it can't stand. Genesis is untrue, it can't stand. Jesus untrue, it cannot stand. And this is part of our process of understanding how it cannot stand. I don't know what it's the pollen or some new fauna that I'm not used to here in Texas, but something got the back of my throat itching. It might just be the fact that I have some good pasta with some good fettuccine sauce on it, and the dairy in it is messing with me. So before we get started, the door is always open for the first 5 minutes for just some general conversation. I grew up Pentecostal. I'm scared not to believe. Oftentimes, those of us who are deconstructing from religion, we are afraid to leave because of family connections and the bogus fear of hell that we may have. Once you recognize, now, if your family only loves you because you are part of their religion, then that's not love. Let me give you the short version, Philip. If they only love you because you're of that religion, that's not love. The second part is as you come to understand the trueness of the universe and how it functions, then you will come to realize that hell doesn't exist. But what are you afraid of? You got about a minute. You got about a minute. Before we get started. So of course we try to stay on subject for the first hour, and then there's open time for deeper discussion. Coach, are Black people native to the Americas pre-Columbia, Columbus? And if so, could you give me an example of with mild evidence? Thank you. Well, I can tell you this. It depends on how you categorize Black people. Certainly, there is evidence that there were some trade going on between Africans and the people who were in the Americas pre-Columbia. The color tone of those people would have been people of color, but were most of the Black people, were most of what we call Black people in the Americas today native, genetically connected to those people? A little bit, but for the most part, no, we're not connected. Most of the Black people in the Americas are connected by African ancestry from the transatlantic slave trade. So there isn't any pre-Columbian history other than the fact that there were some Africans here, but they were still separated, identified differently than the indigenous people who were already here. So that's a bunch of bullshit. Pascal's wager is your fear. Okay, so I want you to think about Pascal's wager like this. Because Pascal's wager is, if I believe in Christianity and it's true, I'm good. If I believe in Christianity and it's false, what do I have to lose, right? Let me ask you this, Philip. Pascal's wager is fraudulent because it only works if you're talking to an atheist. An atheist. That's the only time Pascal's wager works, if you're talking to an atheist. If Christianity is true, you're good to go. But if Hinduism is true, then you would get reincarnated and you have to come back here and hopefully try again. If Christianity is true, you're good to go. But if the ancient Greek religion is true, then you're going to Tartarus. If Christianity is true, you're good to go. But if Islam is true, you're going to Muslim hell. You see how that works? So if Pascal's wager is your fear, think about it in the reality of that wager. And the reality of that wager is that you're only good to go if the atheist is right. If everybody else is right, you're fucked like the rest of us. And I meant to say it that way. You are royally screwed. All right, we're starting to get too many questions and before we get to the subject matter. This is the last one before we start the subject matter. All right. Now, did Jesus live or not, Coach? Yes and no. So did the Bible version of Jesus ever live? No. Were there multiple people that someone like Josephus ben Mathiel wrote about of itinerant preachers who was walking around preaching a Messiah? I'm the Messiah, and we need to overthrow these Romans. Yes. And those stories created the biblical Jesus story. So the biblical Jesus never lived. But if you look at Judas of Galilee, Thaddeus, who claimed to be a Jewish Messiah in the first century, is based off other people's story. But no, the Jesus of the Bible didn't. So I want to thank all my members like Raf for sharing the session. Thank all my members and subscription holders. I want to thank everybody who's here, who shares the videos, subscribes to the channel, members, subscription holders on Facebook, everybody who supports the channel this way. Thank you very much. That's all right. Yeah, that's the cigar budget. And if you like the cigars, my wife Angelina rolls cigars. Contact me at masteringyou10@gmail.com, and you can order some cigars too. All right. It's time to get started. So tonight's conversation actually came to me because of a comment that someone made on a different video. And the comment that they made was the fact that Joseph enslaved is the one who created the enslavement of the Israelite people. And I thought about that for a second, and they had it half right, half right. So first, in order to clarify this and have an understanding of where I'm going with this, I want you to think about something. According to the Bible, there's debt slavery, and then there's chattel slavery. Now, for Israelite upon Israelite, in 99% of the time, it's supposed to be debt slavery. They're supposed to be released after 7 years, year of Jubilee, debt slavery. And if you contemplate, and then the other type of foreigners and foreign nations, they can make them slaves for all their life, their entire life of the person, and then pass them down as inheritances to their children until the slave died. Right? Now, I want you to have that in your mind concerning slavery. And thank you for the support of the cigars. Mastering you, the number 10 at gmail.com. Order your 5-pack today. So, I want you to think about something for a minute. As I go through this, a brief synopsis of the story of Joseph, keep in mind the Israelite version of debt slavery. Debt slavery. That's the main one that we want to focus on here. But we're also going to expose how the Joseph story is just completely untrue, point blank. So many of you may remember the Joseph story, and the Joseph story goes as such. Joseph was born as one of the 12 children of Jacob. Joseph was one of Jacob's favorites because he was born from the wife that he actually loved, which was Rachel. Joseph got his technicolor coat. His brothers were jealous of him. Joseph had a dream. In his dream, he said that he was going to be ruling over his brothers. His brothers didn't like his little arrogant self, so they threw him in a pit. They, excuse me, intended on killing him, but then one of the brothers, not that it matters which one of the brothers was like, nah, let's not do that. Let's sell him off. So he got sold off into slavery. And they went back and they told their dad that he had died. His dad's sad for all in his feelings. Favorite son is dead now. So he's sold off into slavery, I believe, to the Edomites. And they sell him to the Egyptians. He goes into Potiphar's house and he's sold as a slave there. He organizes the house. He became the chief little dude to organize Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife, she looking at him and she's like, young, little youngin, little sexy youngin. Let me get a piece of that. And Joseph was like, nah, sis, I can't do that. And so she makes a false claim. He goes to prison. While in prison, yeah, it doesn't matter that it was Judah. I could care less which brother didn't want to kill him, but instead sold him into slavery. Doesn't make you a good brother. So instead of, so now he's in jail. Oh, sorry. I was responding to that. It doesn't matter. It's like The Rock. It doesn't matter what your name is. But anyway. So he's in jail. And while he's in jail, two other servants of the Pharaoh are in there, and they had dreams. And he interprets their dreams. And then their dreams are fulfilled. They come true. And the one who was I believe the baker, whose dream came true, and he wound up being reconstituted back to the Pharaoh's house. Well, he forgot about old Joseph for a little bit, but then after a while, Pharaoh had another dream. Pharaoh had a dream. And none of the interpreters of the dream, because to understand ancient Egypt in those times and in most times, dreams were very profound. Dreams meant a lot. So they governed sometimes based on dreams. So yes, there's a chakra chart based on Kabbalah behind me. Actually, that's not a chakra chart. It's chakra and Kabbalah mixed in. That one right there. Oh, you're talking about that one right there. Yeah, that's a chakra chart. So now the baker is like, I know a dude who could help you with your dream. So they call Joseph in. Joseph comes in. Pharaoh tells him, I had a dream that one day all of God's children walk hand in hand. No, he said that he had a dream that there were 7 fat cows, and then there were 7 thin cows. Then there were 7 fat grains of wheat, and there were 7 thin grains of wheat. Oh, stop trying to interrupt me. No, I just waiting. That one is the chakra and Kabbalah, the Kabbalah tree mixed together. No, not explaining that right now. Right now, we're talking about this. We talk about the subject matter for the first hour, Jermaine, and then we can talk about that later if you're still here. So he has these dreams, and they bring Joseph in. Joseph said, well, Pharaoh, I know what your dream means. The 7 fat cows and the 7 fat pieces of grain represents 7 years of plenty. And the 7 scrawny cows and the 7 thin wheats of grains represent 7 years of famine. And so the Pharaoh is so impressed with this that he says, you know what, dude, I know I don't know you from Adam. I don't know anything about you. Matter of fact, as far as I know, you tried to rape a woman and you in jail. But I'm going to make you my number 2 guy. You're the number 2 guy. I'm number 1, you number 2. Don't know shit about you. Don't know nothing about you, but I'm going to make you my number 2 guy. You on trial for rape, but I'm going to make you my number 2 guy. On trial for raping your master's wife, but I'm going to make you my number 2 guy. Losing me, though, I really love your content, but this is very troubling. The fact that I got a chakra chart up with Kabbalah mixed in or some chakras. I don't mean to sound crass, Jermaine, but here's the thing, man. You're never going to find anybody that you agree with 100%. And who's to say that I care about that stuff? I care about that one. But hey, man, you gotta always do you. I'll never press anybody to stay with me. Like I always say, chew the meat, spit out the bone. So anyway, we are back to our subject matter. Oh no, is it Obi, Udu, Obu, Ibo? If you've been here long enough, don't take me 100% serious when I be cracking jokes, man. Right, and I get it. It's not historical, but yeah, I mean, it's important to the story because they later want to say Jesus comes out of the line of Judah and all this kind of stuff. But as far as our subject matter today, is not important. Right. So because he interprets this dream, he becomes the number 2 guy. He's the man in Egypt. And while he's the man in Egypt, and here's where we get into the meat and potatoes of today's conversation. Joseph imposes I believe a 10% tax on all the people of Egypt. I think it's like somewhere between 10 and 20% tax on all the people of Egypt. Collects their grain for 7 years, stores their grain for 7 years, and then when the 7-year famine hit, he then charges the people to buy back the grain that he taxed them on for 7 years. And so when a person had the money to pay it, they paid it. The Egyptian royalty gets richer. When they didn't have the money to pay it, they gave cows and goats and other animals. The Egyptian royalty is getting richer. When they didn't have the money or the cows, they sold their land to them. These people are hungry. They're starving. They don't have anything. This is going on for 7 years. So then when they don't have cows, don't have money, he takes their land for the grain that he taxed them on. And then when they don't have money, don't have cows, don't have land, he takes them as slaves. And they are then enslaved to the Egyptian royalty because they couldn't eat, because there was 7 years of famine going on, and they couldn't get back the very grain that he took from them. I'm gonna try to marinate on that for a second. This joker just took them and made. So would you say that he made the Egyptian people debt slaves and chattel slaves? And think about it, he did it off their own money. Like, okay, it's a good thing that Social Security isn't taxed, because it would be exactly like that, in a sense. The government takes your Social Security, and then when you get old, they give it back to you, but you gotta pay them for it. You gotta pay them, you gotta give them something to get your Social Security. Jermaine, my guy, first hour, we stay on the subject matter, okay? If you've heard me before, you've heard me say, I just use the chakra system as just a system of understanding. Do we have energy in our body, energy points? If you talk to a person who practiced the acupuncture and things of that nature, or actually, you know what made me somewhat of a believer in that aspect of it, though, when it comes to that. I was training a lady who did where they press buttons on your foot, press parts of your foot if you got like stomach problems. I've experienced her work, but I don't believe in the chakra system as it's proposed. It's just a good system to gain understanding of self. But let's stay on subject until after the first hour. So, based on this story, if it was real, which we know is not a true story, did Joseph go through a process of placing the Egyptian people into a form of debt slavery and chattel slavery? What do you guys think? I'll wait. While I'm waiting, I know Jermaine is having a very difficult time. So I'll say it once again. I use the system of chakras and meditation for my own personal enlightenment. I don't follow anybody's program. I just use it. Simple as that. If it's a true story, you think it was one of the Ptolemies. The Ptolemies will come into play in this discussion in a little bit later on, but just a very little bit of them, only because something that was written at the time frame of the Ptolemies. But yeah. But now, mind you, this story of Joseph Although there are some scholars who disagree with the time frames. This story of Joseph is supposedly happening between in the late 1900s BCE to the somewhere between the late 1900s BCE into the mid 1700s BCE. Okay. I tried to be nice about this, Jermaine, but now you're telling me to take shit down in my house. Let me explain something one more time. I said I use this just as a system for understanding how to get rid of shame, fear, doubt, things that are real. I just use it. I've explained that I don't believe it, but you don't tell me what to take down in my house. Just like I would never come into your house and tell you what to take down in your house. So don't take me as one of these people who got to please everybody, because I don't. Because at the end of the day, the only person I got to really please is myself and then my wife. Other than that, everybody else can kick fucking rocks. And to say that is misleading, then shit, I wear a cowboy hat, but I'm born in Atlanta. So does that misleading? I wear this. It's just a nice piece of jewelry that I like. If you gotta have somebody who is some perfection that you gotta have, go find that motherfucker. Because I'm not that person. And when you try to rule my house, yes, you get this side of me that's like, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. Now, if you can't just take the content, take what you like, what works for you, and use it for you, then you have a deeper problem. Because the problem isn't that you're building confidence within yourself, that you're elevating your own enlightenment, but your enlightenment is now based on somebody else. And if you're still there, Jermaine, understand, do not base your enlightenment on somebody else being some perception that you have to have. Build your own perception of self. If you don't learn shit from me, learn that what do I say at the end of every video? You got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. I didn't say you got to free me or you got to free the next person or anybody else. You just got to free you and create your own level of growth. Pick and pull from whatever is needed, but don't expect anybody to live up to a standard that you have other than yourself. Other than yourself, nobody else. So don't come into another man's house trying to tell him what to do, bro. Take what you can. And if what I just said bothers you and you like, oh, to hell with me, then that's fine. I'm cool with that, because I don't have to live up to nobody's standard. Nobody's. I will wear this because it's a nice piece of jewelry that I like. I will wear this tree of life because it's a nice piece of jewelry that I like. If I wouldn't keep breaking all my goddamn chains, I have my unk on. Oh, got me up here. Shit, pissed me off a little bit. Anyway, back to the story at hand. God damn. That's why I can't do a religion. People, they expect you to be something that's based on their ideology. You gotta become individual self. You gotta grow in here and here, here and here. Mind, body, soul, whatever you want to call it. That's where you gotta grow. Telling somebody to take something down in their house because it's misleading. Like, I guess the moon phases bother you too. Yeah, it's a good thing you can't see everything else in here. My comic book wall over there might bother you. Or he believes in Spider-Man and Thor. Anyway, it was a form of servitude in the form of land in exchange for food. I would not call it chattel slavery. But, okay, so you wouldn't call it chattel slavery. So it was, for the most part, debt slavery. I'm with you. For the most part, debt slavery, because this man has taken 10%, 20% of what the Egyptians had created for 7 years, and is selling it back to them until they are poor and destitute, until they become slaves, debt slaves to them. So then what happens next in the story starts making it even worse. So I want you to imagine the Pharaoh now has even more land. The royal court and Pharaoh has even more land. They have even more animals. They have even more money. They got, 99% of the money is now in the hands of Pharaoh and the other wealthy elites. And then there's this drought that's going on in the Levant. And here comes Joseph's brothers, Sashay and they little happy to see him because they need some food. They came to Egypt to buy some grain. That's what the story says. So they're coming into Egypt to buy some grain. And while they're coming in, Joseph recognized them. They don't recognize him. I mean, if it's only been about 7 to 10 years, or about 14 to, somewhere between 14 and 7 years since I've seen my brother, I'm pretty sure I'm still going to recognize my brother. But he doesn't recognize his brother. They don't recognize him, but he recognizes them. And he goes through this whole rigmarole with them in order to keep the youngest brother with him, and then the whole family comes back. So when the whole family then comes back, he sets them up in the land of Goshen. And they are to be the shepherds of Pharaoh's flocks. Now I want you to think about it. Pharaoh have been amassing these flocks for years. And now he uses his nepotism to put his brothers in charge of Pharaoh's flocks, putting them automatically in an elite position of managing the flocks. Now, to some Egyptians and the higher elites, doing that type of laborer's work was looked down upon, but to the at-large Egypt, they are the foremans, caretakers of the largest animals, a largest stock of animals in the land. So there's this nepotism that was used to put his family up there up front. His family is well fed, well taken care of. The rest of Egypt is still struggling, still selling off their land, selling off their animals, and they're still going through this destitute because he interpreted his dream and was made number 2. Do you think that after Joseph died and the Egyptians were supposedly still there, that after a few pharaohs, that is no wonder they forgot about Joseph, or that they looked down upon the Israelites? Now we're just saying that based on the story, they look down upon the Israelites, and then starts to take away all the privileges of the Israelites and switch the paradigm. Do you think that's possible? And that's how they ended up flipping the script. Let me give you an idea of that while you're thinking about it. If you, I was listening to this speaker, I don't know if that was yesterday or today. I think it was yesterday. And they had asked this gentleman, when did Irish people in America become white? And the man started explaining how when the Irish first came to the Americas, they were the poorest people in the Americas, even poorer than the freed African slaves. And they used to call them Black Irish. Was a derogatory term that they referred to them as. And much of the Irish community, especially up north, they were supported by the Black people up there. The Black people gave to them, helped them out. And they were cool, fine, because they were poorer. But then once their financial status went above the black people, that's when the Irish became white. So as soon as they, financially were more established, the script flipped. So what I'm saying is, after this nepotism instituted by Joseph, and then Joseph dies, and the Pharaoh dies, and then some generations of pharaohs go by, and about a good 100, 200, about 100, 150 years of pharaohs go by, they start looking at the Israelites and all the wealth that they've amassed, and looking at the Egyptians and seeing how they are on the lower end of the totem pole. And if I'm the Egyptian pharaoh, how can my people be financially subservient to these strangers? And so the script was flipped. And 200 years later, you have Moses. And the Egyptians have been, the Israelites have been enslaved. Did Joseph create that situation? What do you think? Did Joseph ultimately create that situation with bankrupting the people of Egypt and then supplanting his kinfolk with nepotism in a higher place than the people who claim the name of the land? Do you think they were justified in flipping that script? That's the big question. And of course, as always, where was this guy when all this stuff was happening? Infiltration. They flipped it on his head. Yeah. Yes, and don't forget to like, share. And it is like Joseph did a whole infiltration thing. In theory, yes, it was strategic, smart, and economically from the start of surviving and enlarging his nation. Yeah, and I can see that. As I can see how economically that was smart to bring his brothers and sisters, bring his brothers and everybody in and set them up. I don't think that his economic plan of taking 10% of the grain from the people and then selling it back to them and taking all their land and animals and enslaving a large portion of the Egyptian people, that part wasn't smart. I don't think that part was smart. I mean, I understand the government taking some amount of taxation to help the people, so that when it's taking some amount of taxation, storing up the seeds, storing up the wheat, the grain. But when you're going through, you can't charge the people and take their stuff. Like, I don't get me wrong, American government has a lot of problems, but I give them credit that, like, during COVID, funds were given. You didn't have to go sell nothing in order to get some funds. I was getting my little, what was it, like $600-700 check. You become unemployed. I've been on unemployment once. I didn't mind getting my money. So in this part, we are following the biblical narrative. According to the biblical narrative, that's what Joseph did. He collected a taxation from the people for 7 years, and then sold the people back their own stuff and took their land, their property, and their freedom during that 7 years of famine. Now, then it's following the biblical narrative that he brought in his brothers and then appointed them as heads of Pharaoh's animals up in Goshen. The part that I'm asking the critical thinking through is, did Joseph create a situation that identifies and justifies how the flip was scripted and why successive pharaohs would have been like, to hell with that dude or what he set up? All I see is a whole bunch of Israelites up in Goshen living great while the rest of my people is living, horrible. Because the Bible doesn't give you a narrative of when or why the script flipped. Now, I will give you that for a communist state, and half of that I'll give you for a socialist state. Because living in Germany, man, when the average person is taxed at 40 to 50%, yeah, there ain't much left. Seeing former communists, knowing people who lived in a communist state, and they're taking 70 and 90%, yeah, I'm with you. But that strategy translates to what the Jewish people are doing in the region historically to gain wealth through exploiting the needs of desperate citizens through banking loans. Now, I knew that doing this subject, sorry, that somebody was going to relate that to some of the things that we've seen in more modern history of how one particular group seems to get into the banking and controlling of money quite often at the detriment of other people around them. And I wondered, I thought out loud to myself, is this one of the lessons that they utilize to bring about that ideology, that thought process? Look at what Joseph did. Maybe they grew so large in number, they felt emboldened. As I would think people would, if you're sitting up there nice and pretty, thinking that you got everything taken care of, you think that you're a part of the upper echelon. But if you came in as an outsider, according to this story. Let me put it in like this. Not that it was right. It was not right at all. But I've read stories and talked to a few people who were present during the German Jewish Holocaust. And many of them was telling me how their fathers and how they themselves thought that because they were economically advantaged, that the government would never turn on them like they did. Your economics will not keep you in place simply because when you are dealing with other people who don't look or act like you. Okay, this is just not a good statement. Took it from the Templars. Okay, dude, you do realize the Templars happens about 2,000 years after this story supposedly happened, right? Even the time frame where this story would have been edited for the last time or created is still a good 1,000 years almost before the Templars. Don't take the conspiracy ideas of people like the Templars and make it seem like they took it from them. Now, maybe the Templars looked at it and said, But this is not relatable to the Templars, actually. Don't do that. Dark light delirium. This we don't do, and we don't do racism, okay? We don't do racism or gender bias or any of those things that separate us as enlightened beings. We don't do those, okay? But now, if you're talking about the Templars weren't the first ones to come up. I mean, international banking, yes, but with that get me off subject. No. You almost got me, Cristobal. Almost got me. Not ready to go off subject yet. So now for the deconstructing part of this story. Joseph's story supposedly happened somewhere between 1900 BCE and 700 something BCE. They calculate that because one of the things is that they calculate that the story of Moses happens around 1500 BCE. And they calculate that, let's say 1500, around 1400 BCE. They calculate the Moses story happening around that time frame because, what's that full name? Solomon said that it has been 430 years since Exodus had happened, and they counted back from Solomon's time, which Solomon's time is supposed to be somewhere around 1000 or 900 BCE. This is a gross miscalculation, of course, because according to actual history, the Moses story would have happened around the late 1300s, early 1200s, which is an impossibility for it to have happened at that time frame. And the Joshua story happened around 1200. Now, when you backtrack from there and go back 430 years from the relative time of Moses, whether it's 1300s or 1400s, you're looking at around the 1800s. So that's why this story is in the 1900s to 1700s BCE. Here's the problem. The information that this story is based off of, here's the problem. During the 1900s to 1700s BCE, all the way down till 1200 BCE, folks. From 1900 to 1200 BCE was a time of flourishing, greatness in Egypt. No famines, no hardships, no plagues. None of those things are recorded in Egypt during that time frame. The only time the closest time to that where a famine is recorded in Egypt is afterwards in the 1100s to 1000s BCE, which we commonly now refer to as the Bronze Age collapse. A famine happened then. The time frame before that would have been in 2600 BCE under Pharaoh Djoser. So in the time of Djoser, there is the famine. There is recorded. So let me put this in perspective. During the time frame of the Ptolemies in the 300s and 200s BCE, they recorded the famine stele, which talks about during the reign of King Djoser, or Pharaoh Djoser, that he had a dream. Well, he didn't have a dream, sorry. That they were going through a 7-year famine. During that 7-year famine, Imhotep goes down to Elephantine, and he goes to sleep and Elephantine at that time frame was dedicated to Thoth or Tahuti. he goes to sleep in the ruined temple of Canaan. While he's in there, Imhotep sends him a dream. And he sends him a dream that this famine will end and the waters will flow if he is worshipped properly. Imhotep returns back to Drozier up in Heliopolis, and he tells him about the dream. And so they dedicate money and resources and priests to go and rebuild the temple of Canaan. And when they rebuild the temple of Canaan, the Nile River is flooded again and the drought is over. Other than that, you have an Akkadian Sumerian story that is recorded in the Epic of Gilgamesh of Anu, where there was a 7-year famine, and then Anu gives a dream. I forgot who he gave the dream to, and then they do some worshiping and the famine is over. So you have these different, it's common in this area that you have these 7-year famine themes. And Ptolemy records this on what's called the famine stele. So Drozier could not have been the time frame of Joshua. It's way back too far, way too early. And there was no other famines. You know what? There was somebody I was trying to think of and I couldn't think of it, but some of the story, Osiris, some of the Joseph story can be based on Osiris. Hell, I forgot that dude. I couldn't think of him, but there was some, and there's another dude named as well that some of his story is based off of. But no, Osiris is more linked to the Moses story. Osiris is the one who went up there and he led the lepers out of, supposedly led some lepers out of Egypt. So he's more along with Osiris. No, there's another dude. His name is it's like Yuma or you is YU something. A Semitic name that Joseph could have been. No, Akhenaten was not Moses. Hell no. That don't track at all, Tim. It doesn't track at all. Can you read Meta Nature? Very little. I used to be able to read a lot of it, but I haven't studied it in a long time, so not as much. You had asked me that question 20 plus years ago, I was pretty decent at it. But like anything, without practice, you lose it. I used to be able to speak French pretty good. Used to be able to speak German pretty good. Not no more. Hey, I'm going to take this break to say thank you, Marco. So Marco bought his tickets to join us for this webinar on our deep dive into the Noah's flood story and how the flood story is an impossibility. So thank you for doing that. You can find the link in the comments as well as on in the description of the videos. But thank you, Marco, for joining me. I don't care if there's, well, I don't care if there's one person, two persons. We're going to do the damn thing. We're going to do it. Well, yeah, if you look at this Bible, it repeats this whole Messiah, Joseph being the Messiah, Moses being the Messiah. There's a constant theme of that throughout this Bible. So, sorry, my wife sent me a message. Y'all know she's more important than y'all. So anyway, where was I? How this story cannot even be true. So the Joseph story doesn't fit into any time frame in the Egyptian storyline. There has never been there's zero evidence. If you didn't see my video I published, I think yesterday, I published a video where I was saying that if Israelites, 2.5 million Israelites were in Goshen, where's the evidence? When they excavate cities like Avaris, where's the evidence? When they found this ancient city that was built during the time of Akhenaten, which places it in, I believe, the 1400s BCE. That supposedly is a time frame when there were Israelites either in or getting ready to leave, but Israelites would have been up in that area for over 200 plus years, almost 400 years actually. Where's the evidence of Israelites in Goshen? And if Joseph did this, there's zero evidence. Under Pharaoh Joseph, he had Imhotep. Ain't no Joseph. Ain't no Joseph. You find no Joseph nowhere near there. Any inscriptions. No, excuse me, no houses, no nothing. These stories were simply made up, created, based on popular themes derived from multiple cultures in the Levant. Okay, so yes, we use the more anglicized names, Greeks or Greek names for these people. What's the point though? I'm not understanding your point. What you're getting at, these stories are supposed to be old, but the names were not presented as they should have been. Okay, but understand this. I understand what you're saying, Ruben, but you're looking at it from more of a modernized thought process, trying to imprint your thoughts today on back then. When these would have been oral traditions, they would not have been saying Moses came. They would have been saying Moshe. All right. They would have been using, when the Israelites was in Babylon, when the Israelites were captured by the Assyrians and under their thumb, when the Israelites first established themselves in the land of Canaan, they would have not been using Greek names. The Greek names started to come about once the Septuagint, like you so eloquently put, during the Ptolemaic Empire, when the Septuagint was completed. So the people back then would have used the names, the proper names of their people. It's just like today. If I would have said that Imhotep went to a temple of Thoth, well, Imhotep wouldn't have said Thoth, he would have said Tahuti. So you got, don't get hung up on something that's kind of trivial. I wouldn't get as hung up on that. You know, because just like people using the name Jesus now, we know that there was no J for until the 1600s, but it's trivial at best. There is no Moses. The Moses story and this Joshua story is most likely started to become, let me tell you what it's most likely based on. During the Bronze Age collapse, when before the Bronze Age collapse, let me start a little bit before that. Somewhere in and around the 1300s BCE, maybe the early 1200s BCE, A group of Canaanites decided that they wanted to be different. They wanted to separate from the other Canaanites. Or they were a group of Canaanites who wanted to separate because they were living under Egyptian rule in the 1300s or 1200s, early 1200s, in Judea, modern day Israel. But so when they decided to leave, they left and they went east, into the hill country, into the mountains, became a nomadic group. As the decades went by of them becoming this nomadic group out in eastern, out there in the desert, in the eastern parts of modern day Israel, they started to change their Canaanite religion and they started calling themselves Israelites. And then in around 1204 BCE, they get their ass handed to them by Pharaoh Meneptah. Now, then about 100 years later or less, the Bronze Age collapse happens. The Egyptians are defeated by these sea people, and Egypt loses its control over the Levant. So now they have escaped Egypt. So the Israelites start telling the story of how they escaped Egypt. But then as the decades go by, characters are added. Depth is added to the story. That is most likely where this story comes from. Do you subscribe to, I don't know what that theory is. Now, there are some stories that I would agree with you on. Obi, is it Obi or Obi? But I think this was a literal story that they literally believed. They thought that this actually happened. And I think about these things and how they would have thought about it back then. That is one of the things that the biblical excusologists, they want to connect Moses to the royal bloodline and use one of the pharaohs, so because they know this story just doesn't fly in any other sort. If they go ahead and leave it as it is, then they know it's just a copy of this Sargon story, which it is a copy of the Sargon. It has many elements of the Sargon story, but even that part of Sargon story, I think, is made up. Do I know the speed of light? I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I understand the concept and know. All right. I know we want to pinpoint. See, this is one of the mistakes that people make, in my opinion. We want to pinpoint one individual to be another individual in the Bible. But that just simply doesn't work. Because when you pick one individual, that individual will fail every time. But when you think about it in terms of how a story begins today based on certain levels of reality, and then over time, the story grows, and changes. And then elements are brought in from other commonly known stories. What's your point about the speed of light? I say yes and no. I don't think that most people are all that original when it comes to something completely new. So the idea that there was no inspiration for basically any figure, both known and unknown at all, not exactly sure I understand what you mean by that one. Oh, most people aren't all that original. No, so they just borrowing stories. Yes, I have. And that is that different aspects of the Old Testament were written by different class of priests. For instance, I think the Elohists were said to have written Genesis chapter 1, and the so if you right, the E text was chapter 1, and I think the P text was chapter 2, or something, or vice versa. But yes, I get what you're saying. I understand that theory. It hasn't been proven out yet because we haven't actually found those texts, but based on the language and the linguistic archaeology, it seems that though that theory may be very prevailing. Okay, no, I don't believe the story is true at all. I believe that it is my estimation that this story of Joseph and all the way to the Exodus is based on the Israelites being able to get off and under being under Egyptian rule and then getting out of Egyptian rule during the Bronze Age collapse, which did have a drought involved in it. And then they added the people, Joseph and Abraham and all these other people were then added to their story over decades. But it's really just a story about how the Israelites decided that they didn't like being under Egyptian rule in Israel, not in Egypt. And then they just ginned up their own narratives. That's the way it's preached in church. I meant to say that. I meant to say you ain't never this is an aspect of the story of Joseph that you have never heard it preached. They will go all the way around the whole fact of how Joseph bankrupted everybody, bankrupt Egypt, took advantage of the Egyptian people. But that joke, but and okay, for it just he showed forgiveness for what his brothers did to him after he kind of tricked them and scared the shit out of them. Which I understand. You want to see that they have some level of contrition before you forgive them, maybe before you let them in. But you can forgive somebody without them showing any kind of sorrow for what they did. But they ain't gonna ever. A pastor is never gonna tell you about the bullshittery that Joseph was doing. And thank you for bringing this up, Sean, because I think this is very important. If you think about the last 15, 20 minutes, we've had, he said, I have to point out that three different people try to say that Moses was this actual person or that person. Let's think about that. You got people trying to say these people are different people. Everybody got their own ideas and they want to say that it's this person in history and that person is. When the reality is, the Moses of the Bible never existed. There's no way you do all the things Moses claimed to have done, and there's no archaeology. Got to give a special hello to Debbie Tate. Debbie Tate, long time listener. Can you explain Göbekli Tepe contracts the timeline of the Bible? Okay, what's with the sheath stuff though? I'm not understanding it. But anyway, as one of the things that I've talked about before, the fact that Göbekli Tepe tracks back to about 9,000 BCE and Taran Tepe tracks back to about 11 to 12,000 BCE demonstrates, one, that the Bible, its origin story of Genesis, tracks to about 4,600 and something BCE. So we know we have civilization and people existed long before the Bible. Before Cain, who they say is the first builder of a city, no, they had already built the city. The people of Göbekli Tepe had built a city, and what we found out more recently, because Göbekli Tepe is only about 5% excavated, is that there were dwellings inside of Göbekli. I don't know if you saw that lately, Jermaine, but they found that it has dwellings in it. So even though they tried to put them and say that, oh, they were still hunters and gatherers, even if they still went out and hunted, they gathered back into that one facility and they still lived together. But it throws the Bible's timelines way off just from the point of Genesis. Look, Göbekli Tepe throws off the Sumerian timeline, because the Sumerians were only going back to like 7,000, 8,000 BCE. And some scholars only put them at 6,000 BCE. So they were doing their thing before Mesopotamia ever came up. What's up, Deuteronomy 18:8-18? Nah, I ain't trying. It's already been done. We've already established that the Joseph story is fake, forgery, fugazi. Like I said, where is the evidence? Okay. Well, I don't know if you're new to me. Well, no, you said you've seen me before. If I don't understand something, if I'll ask a question about something before I make an assumption. So that's why I ask. See, that's why I can't. Isaac. See, Isaac. I ain't even talking to you. Who do you think the Sphinx represents? I think that's a relative question. It is believed by some scholars that the Sphinx was originally the head of Anubis. So it would represent the worship of Anubis, because back before Osiris became the god of the underworld, Anubis was the original god of the underworld. So some think that it represents Anubis, that Anubis was the first head on it. Others say that Tahuti's face was on it, that the ibis was on there, so it represents wisdom and knowledge. And then yet there are others who say that before it was also Osiris replacing Anubis. And then it was one of the Pharaoh's kids. Now, astrologically, people like to say that, oh, since the body is a lion, then it represents Leo. And for those people who lived back then, maybe. Because here's one thing that we can't do, that I thought about this before, a long time ago. What we think what we've named the constellations, and this is going to take us back to Göbekli Tepe, actually. What we've named the constellations is not the same constellations that the Egyptians or the Sumerians or somebody else would have been calling them. When you look at some of the things on Göbekli Tepe, they have the vulture constellation. Well, where's that one? And they have it at a zodiac level. Where's that? Look at the Chinese today. The Chinese zodiacs are different than the ones we have, because our zodiacs are based on the Greeks. So when the Sphinx was built, they weren't calling it. Were they calling the same constellation Leo that we call Leo today because of the Greeks? You ever think about that? The Canis Major, and with Sirius being the dog star. The ancient Egyptians had a different configuration of Canis Major, and that was the constellation of Asar, the constellation of Isis. Orion was the constellation of Orion was the constellation of Osiris. The dogs, the constellation of Canis Major was Aset, Isis. But now the Greeks changed that to Canis Major. So I can't go with the zodiac aspect of it because different cultures do different things. And every region has some level of astrotheology. Every region does, because and that's why we see those commonalities. Man could look at the sky and he can look at the nature around him. So I can't say what the Sphinx meant, because one, we don't have any information on the people who built the Sphinx. According to many scholars, and the most prominent one, he's passed away, was John Anthony West, the Sphinx has been around at least 26,000 years, most likely. At minimum 13,000 years, but most likely 26,000 years. But the last time the Sahara Desert was a rainforest, which would have been about 13,000, anywhere from 8 to 13,000 years ago, the Sphinx was already there. We don't know why they built it. We don't have any, at least not that they're telling us, not that they're showing us why it was built and whom it was built for. It was built before the current iteration of Egyptian gods were ever created. And we know their story changed over there from about 6,000 BCE up until the Ptolemaic Empire. Their stories changed a few times. There are no absolutes in life, even though this is an absolute statement. That's a good one. That's a good one. But I can absolutely say that right now we have no idea why or what the Sphinx actually represents. We don't have enough information. Egypt has not been excavated, no. It's been excavated enough to know that there were no Egyptians, there were no big slave, there were no slaves, no Israelite slaves in Goshen. We know that. Every ancient city that's been discovered in Goshen ain't none of them Israelites. And if during the times of Moses, there was supposed to have been 2 million of them up there, over 2 million. And then Deuteronomy, riddle me this, Batman. Egypt didn't lose control of the Levant until around 1100 BCE. So if they was leaving Egypt and they went to the Levant, they were just going to more Egypt, right? How do you leave Egypt just to go to more Egypt? Huh? That's like me being in Atlanta and I'm downtown and I say, I'm leaving Atlanta, and I just go up to Midtown. I'm still in Atlanta. You're still in the same city. Come on, man. According to your Bible, they all left. According to your Bible, they all left and they all crossed the Red Sea overnight on foot in one night, 36 miles at the shortest distance. Come on, man. Come on now. Yeah, I can't even, I don't even see how people, you really got to just tell yourself something different to accept that. Where is that in your Bible? Where, I really want to know where you got that from. I'm serious. I really want to know, where did you get that 80% stayed and 20% left? Where did that come from? I never. We just went through, over the year, we went through Genesis, every word of Genesis, every word of Exodus, and not in one place in going through every word of Exodus does it say that 80% of the people stayed. It said all. That's funny to me right there. Did all the Israelites leave during the Exodus? Okay, hold on now. According to the AI, it's saying AI is saying 80% remained in Egypt. Hold on. We might got something new over here. Wait. Where the hell that information come from though? I need to see the where that comes from. Where did that come from? So I see that there's something saying that some scholars are saying, trying to change it from, there's some scholars are suggesting that the numbers should be interpreted differently. It might refer to 600 clans or military units instead of the 600,000 people. So the alternate sources of this so far is the Gospel Coalition, Grace Covenant in Charlotte, and the ancienthebrews.org. I don't think I ever heard of ancienthebrews.org. Who the hell are y'all? Yeah, that is coming from that number. I ain't buying it, bro. That's coming from some apologists. Not buying it. That's coming from some apologists. I'm glad you put it out there, though. See, here's the thing. I wouldn't trust a rabbinic commentary. What I would trust is a linguistic archaeologist, because they don't have a skin in the game. They don't have a perspective one way or another. They just want whatever it is. When you got somebody who's an apologist or somebody who's from a religious organization, they will do their damnedest to make it fit whatever the current narrative is. So you may trust that because you believe in that, and that's why you trust it, because you already believe it. I didn't say you were Christian. And when things are written in the Talmud, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there a difference between the Talmud and the books of the Pentateuch? Oh, you just posted right here. The Talmud is a book of debates. Gotcha. I knew there was a difference between the Talmud and the actual Pentateuch. So it's a book of debates. So give me a PhD paper on the Exodus story from a religious studies university that's then been through peer review from other linguistic archaeologists from around the world, who either going to point out the mistakes that the person made or the agreement of their getting the translations right. Give me a rabbi. Nah, he already got an agenda. He already got an agenda. How could you make this statement that the Talmud is Judaism kept pure while Christians came to wash the word, when the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, which is the Jewish Bible, has been edited and edited and edited and redacted, especially between 500 BCE to around 100 BCE. It went through so many edits and redacting. It's not pure. The only pure writing you can have if you sat down right now and you wrote a story. And I guarantee if it turns out to be a very popular story, in 100 years, it'll have changes if other people try to copy your story. Dorothea of Sidon, I can't remember if I've ever heard of that or not. Do you really believe that there are no edits in that? You do realize that when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, that there are some differences between the Isaiah scroll and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and what the Hebrew Bible has as far as Isaiah. You do know there's some differences in it, that they're not exactly the same. There are edits, my guy, plenty of edits. You can find that in every writing in the dead that's found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, whether it's the Book of Jubilees or any of those, they're edits. And then what's sad about the Dead Sea Scrolls, that's the oldest Jewish writing that you got, and that was, I think that's around what, 200 CE. It's around 200 CE is the Dead Sea Scrolls. You literally have nothing from 500 BCE, 400 BCE. But the fact here, okay, wait. So he's saying that there are translation differences, which a translation difference can give you a different meaning, right? Like if you give it a different name, if you translate something incorrectly or differently, it could give them a different meaning to the words. Like the Bible, for those of you who are going to join me, this is a shameless plug coming. For those of you who are going to join me in the deconstruction of Noah's flood here on May 4th, the link is in the comments as well as in the on the page. But for those who are going to join, there is a word that is iris. Iris mean land, speaking generally of a regional area. Iris. I am in the iris of San Antonio. But then, as it's been translated from Aramaic to Hebrew to Greek, you read into English. In the Noah story, it says the world or earth, when iris don't mean that. So even if your differences were simply, but they're not, were simply translation errors, it still changes the meaning of the whole story. Now, if this God is real, how can his story change? How can the meaning change? That can't change if it's a real God. If I was God, I would have written a story that nobody could ever change. That's not in your Talmud. I mean, that's not in your Torah. That sounds like some stuff somebody made up. I'm sorry, my guy. That just sounds like some made up bullshit. All right. So when it says that Isaac hated Esau, it actually meant that he loved him less. That ain't what the word hated mean. But that's a good example. And here's the thing. Here's an equivalency. You stating that, well, the Talmud says this, even though your Torah says something differently, is the same way that Catholics say, well, the Bible says this, but Catholic doctrine says this. You see what I'm saying? Same thing. If you bring me something good that I can't refute, then I'm not going to. If you say something that's straight up, that's like bona fide, sure. But you're talking about what rabbinical doctrine is over what the actual writing that they supposed to believe in is. That's kind of like that dude, like every president. I ain't gonna just put it on this current one. That's like every president and senator and legislator. Swear up and down, they know the Constitution, but they refer to it and work with it in their own doctrine, what they think that they can do. But the Talmud, why would I go with the Talmud? If I was Hebrew, I would be like, I'm not going with the Talmud. I'm going with the Torah itself. And I'm going to go with what those words meant to the people back then when they wrote it, not what you are sitting up here deciding now or what somebody decided hundreds of years later. That makes no sense. Makes no sense to me. It's like the argument between Methodists and Baptists. Baptists say you got to be fully submerged and you got to make that decision of your own accord when you're of age. Methodists, you can sprinkle and you can dedicate babies. They're doing it based on their own doctrine. not what the books say, which don't say shit about sprinkling and dedicating babies. You see what I'm saying? So I'm gonna go by when I was a Christian, I went by what the book said. And then I went and dug deeper to see what it actually meant back in the day, back when they supposedly wrote it, at least as far back as I could go. But then I started, of course, learning, oh, they've been telling the story for about a few hundred years, almost 1,000 years, and then they wrote it down. They don't know what the hell happened in Egypt and Genesis and all this stuff. They're just making up kingships until we get into Hezekiah. They're just making up kingships. We ain't got no proof of Moses. I don't think you gave me I don't think you gave me anything that I can't refute there, Deuteronomy. But you got it got to be something that's real. It got to be something real. It got to be something that's it's like last week when Primo was on here. I couldn't refute the fact of the Northern Israelite kingship, the kingship of Judah. Couldn't refute those things. Straight up. Those people, for the way that we look at history, they existed. Hezekiah, Jehoiakim, they good to go. Ahaz, good to go. David and Solomon, not so much. Joshua, Moses, nah. Caleb, nah. Uriah, nah. Dumbass Samson, no. The list of, okay, one, and somebody made this point. I forgot. I did a video yesterday, and then somebody was on there like talking about my cigars. Why y'all always gotta talk about my cigars? Get off my cigars, man. But I know you're just making jokes though. I've been making jokes too, so I had to make a joke back. But the list of rabbi history of the list of rabbis has a history of rabbis 2,500 years. All right, so that'll take it back to right after the Babylonian captivity ended, and they were under Persian control, and then Greek, and then Hasmonean, and then Roman. All right, so this is the time frame that I'm in agreement that this is when the actual what's called the Old Testament or the Torah was being written down and being edited and redacted. Before that, there's no proof that any of those things were written, that any of it was written down. So, okay. And you can hit me up at masteringyou10@gmail.com and order your 5-pack or more of La Angelinas. Had to do it. Shameless plug. But nobody has shown or proven that any of these things, that this was in its totality in 700 BCE, in 1000 BCE. You can't prove Israelites even existed prior to about 1200 BCE. There's no proof of them. And then how these stories are ultimately similar to somebody else's story who used to conquer the same people. I mean, we talked about this last week, but when you follow the line of the Israelite God, it goes back to the Canaanite God Yahweh, which then goes to the Canaanite God El, which then goes to Enlil, and which then goes to Anu and Namu. You can't detach them from that. They worship the storm deity, and then they merge their storm deity with El. the high god from the Canaanite pantheon and Canaanite and Sumerian Akkadian pantheon. The Talmud preserves oral tradition. And I don't care how much they claim that, oh, if you don't get it right, then they have a code to know if you got it right, and blah, 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 blah. Come on, man. Telephone game never works. Never works. Telephone game never, ever, ever works. Hell, I'd rather have faith in Jesus than have faith in the telephone game. Were the Canaanites kin to the Hebrews? They are the Hebrews in this sense. Somewhere around 1300 to 1200 BCE, a group of Canaanites separated themselves and start calling themselves Israelites. It started calling themselves Israelites, Hebrews. So originally, Hebrews were Canaanites who just separated. It's it's kind of like the city that I grew up in, Marietta, right? Well, Atlanta. And Sandy Springs was part of Roswell and Atlanta. So they were Roswellians or Atlanteans. But then these very same people decided they wanted to have their own city, so they carved out Sandy Springs as their own city. And so now they're Sandy Springians. But originally, they were Roswellians and Atlanteans. Same people. They just separated themselves. So why did the Hebrews invade Canaan? Well, one, they didn't. If you're talking about the Joshua story, that never happened. Now, what you do have that happen, once they separate themselves and you have multiple generations have gone by and they've identified themselves differently, they have given their own worship to their own God, and then the Bronze Age collapse happens and Egypt no longer controls Canaan. They start fighting wars amongst each other because now it's a scramble. Egypt no longer controls this area. The Hittites aren't coming down yet. The Assyrians aren't coming down yet. Nobody's trying to control this land. So it's a scramble. And so the Israelites fight the other Canaanite groups because the Israelites weren't the only Canaanite group to separate themselves from the main Canaanites. The Perizzites, Jebusites, all the ites were originally Canaanites. So the term Canaanite could be used to describe multiple tribes of people. But all of that happened after the Bronze Age collapse, which doesn't fit the time frame of Joshua. So Donald's looking for a link to the Noah class. So we're going to post that right on in there. So I just posted the link. So you should be able to click on that link. If not, look in the description of this video on YouTube and you'll see it in the link there. It might be on the description and I know I posted a link on the Facebook page today as well. Um, right, according to the Bible. Exactly. Okay, I'm with you. Yes, and the Israelite worship El. And that's an interesting thing because at first it was Yahweh. Yahweh is the son of El and Asherah. But then over time, El, they stopped worshiping Asherah. They replaced Yahweh with, they merged Yahweh and El together. That's why he looks bipolar in the Old Testament. Sometimes he's nice, sometimes he's not. Because El was a nicer God than Yahweh. Because Yahweh was this hot-headed storm deity. What did Eric say? Has anyone seen a documentary that shows that Jesus couldn't have been born in Nazareth and traveled to Bethlehem? I haven't seen a documentary on that. Have anybody else seen this documentary that Eric is talking about? Well, according to the story, Jesus was supposedly born in Bethlehem. Now, that was the force. They had to make it that he was born in Bethlehem in order to make it fit into their Old Testament prophecies. What's the name of the documentary, Eric? That'd be helpful. But we know that the Jesus birth story is convoluted as all get out. There are so many errors in that story that don't fit. Yeah, that story just doesn't fit at all. The time frame don't fit. The place don't fit. Like there's no way Jesus was born in zero. He wasn't. The death of Herod and well, the life of Herod and his death doesn't fit the time frame that Quirinius would have came down for a what you call it, a census. None of that fits. And exactly, the Romans didn't make people return to their homes to do a census. That's never been recorded. That's never happened. And I do think they threw some astrotheology in there to try to make that work by saying that. Now we got to remember though that I think it's Isaiah or Ezekiel, one of them. I think it's Ezekiel actually. No, it might have been. It's Ezekiel, I think. When he was saying that a woman will give birth, it doesn't say a woman will give birth. It says a woman has given birth. Now they've changed the Bible to say will give birth in order to fit the Jesus narrative. But in the most original that we have of Old Testament writings, it says that a young maiden has given birth. And that was that prophet, so-called prophet, talking to King Aha. I keep saying because I want to say Kazah. King Ahaz to let him know that don't worry about this, what we going through. We gonna get out of this. Don't worry, a Messiah has been born already. All right, Eric said he's gonna let us know tomorrow. You know, when you got that little mucus, you're not supposed to smoke cigars. I don't give a damn. I understand the joke. I understand the joke. But in the story, to be honest, frankincense and myrrh had great value. You know, that'd be like you bringing me some precious stones in today, or giving me some. That'd be like you giving me some money today. So frankincense and myrrh did have value. I want to get in on the joke with you, but I can't. Especially frankincense, because frankincense weren't common to that area. They usually came from places like Yemen, Oman, Somalia, modern day Somalia, India is where they would have gotten frankincense. So that was something that was of value. That's why in the Sheba Solomon story, she brought frankincense and myrrh as well, because it did have great value. It's kind of like back during the Renaissance, if you had a purple shirt, it meant a lot because it was hard to get whatever it is. I forgot what it is that makes purple dye. Isn't it strange that Egypt have had so much play in the Middle Eastern area during the BCE area, the small amount of significance it gets in the Bible. Because Egypt controlled them, Egypt was an easy target to be the bad guy. Because the Levant was vassal states of Egypt for about a good 3,000 years. So they made them the bad guy in the story. Say, could have brought him some KFC. Since we're talking about Jesus, why do people care if he was born sinless and lived a sinless life? If he's God, he can't sin anyway. God killed the world, and it's not a sin. So Jesus could have done whatever he wanted to still do. Because he's supposed to, if he committed sins, then he couldn't be God. Then they couldn't create their I was about to say trivium. They couldn't create their Trinity. So they have to make him sinless so that he could be better and could be a perfect sacrifice. You know. So they had to make him that way. It's kind of like those red heifers. They have to be perfect in every way in order for them to cleanse the priest and the people. But they shouldn't. I understand what you're saying. It shouldn't really matter. What the hell is Eric and Sean talking about? Let me show y'all what Eric and Sean talking about. Eric said, I'll take all hand-me-downs except draws. And Sean said, no, nah, just wear a toga and swing it left and right. Y'all see what I gotta deal with? See what I gotta deal with? Oh my goodness. For shame. So I got a question. How many of y'all recognized, wait a minute, let me rephrase this. How many of y'all that who did not go through what's wrong with the Bible in Genesis, in the story of Joshua, how many of y'all have ever thought about the fact of how Joshua used that nepotism and bankrupt Egypt and took advantage of the Egyptian people in their worst situation, according to this story? I'm just curious. Yeah, now the Bible never says 3 kings, but it's been, they connected to Orion's belt or Asar's belt. I don't like calling it the Greek name. It's Asar's belt, damn it. But yes, it is attached to that. And this goes back to the old story that on the 25th of December, Asar's belt points directly to the star Sirius. And for the Egyptians, the star Sirius was the womb of Isis in the Isis constellation, which points directly to where the sun will begin to rise 1 degree north on the 25th, and the sun is born on the 25th of December. That story was taken and used to be part of the Jesus story, both in the birth and the resurrection. Why do you think there were 3 wise men? Because it was the Asar's belt or Orion's belt in the Greek. They call the star Sirius Sopidet. What is that? What does Sopidet mean? Because now I don't know what that means. I know what the Egyptologists that I worked with a long time ago, what they expressed of how that constellation was a Set's constellation, and that the star Sirius was her womb. And of course, like I said, that was shit. Hold on, man. That was almost 30 years ago. I'm just looking this word up that he wrote. Oh, no wonder it ain't coming out right. Might help right there, right? S-O. All right, so Peta is the ancient Egyptian name from the star Sirius. It is the personification as the Egyptian goddess known to the Greek as Sothis. She was conflated with Isis as the goddess and Anubis as the god. Her symbol to the Romans and the Greeks was a dog, which is why they call it a dog star. Her husband was Osiris, which we know is Isis. Her son was Horus, and Sopudu, Venus. So like I said earlier, one of the hardest things about the Egyptian religion is that there are so many changes in it. You got to throw an extra E in there after the P, Boondocks. I don't. If you Sopedet, and it's Egyptian, it's Sopedet. Oh, I see. It's also spelled that way. Sorry, it's spelled that way as well. I didn't get anything. Okay, yep. Triangle or sharp one. But it's still merged with Isis, it would appear. It's still a merger. It still comes out to be Isis. Let me check another source real quick. And see, in the first dynasty, sometimes it's drawn as a cow, other times it is a woman. In Upper Egypt, it was a woman riding alongside of a dog. In the Middle Kingdom, it was associated again with Horus. It was also during the time frame. Where's the time frame? Did they give a time frame on this one? They don't give a time frame, but they talk about it being part of the Isis, Osiris, and Horus connection. Yeah. I think that's the thing that makes Egypt is very difficult because relative to different time frames, they tell a different story. I know we will want to say that Jesus is the Son. When you look at it from the, if you imprint astrotheology, which there is some astrotheology in the New Testament, and you can place Jesus as a son character, especially with him coming into an age in the 30 degree and going out of an age at 33 in the 33rd degree. I can see those connections. But he's also a mixture of at least four different people that Josephus wrote about who were claiming to be messiahs. Now, if you're going to write a God story, especially at a time frame when people believe those constellations mean something and that it tells you things that's going to happen, I can see how they would attach those types of ideas to the Jesus character. but he's also meant to be a man who did all these miracles. And then just like Hercules died and ascended to his father in the stars. So this is, I always say it's both. It has elements of both in there. And that's why you can't be, well, I suggest you can't be one-minded on it. Because when you're one-minded on it, you can't see the whole, to me, you can't see the whole picture of how they want to make these characters be a representation of something in the sky or the earth, but also they're supposed to be literal people and characters. So Jesus, the Jesus biblical story, he is both an astrological, well, yeah. Is it astrological that I want to use? That's not the word I want to use. Well, I can use it. It wants to be an astrological character, a astrotheology character, but he's also a literal character. But in both, he's a literary character of the imagination. Because if it was all, there is, even though Galatians say that it's allegory, it wasn't allegory to the people before Paul. Abraham and all them people were real people. They established bloodlines of kingship based on them being real people. So when you look at David, he's supposed to come from Jesse, who comes from Obadiah, who comes from Boaz, and so on and so forth, back down the line. These supposed to be real people that connect to the real Abraham. And Jesus is supposed to come from this Davidic line, supposed to be a real person. But I see how all the astrology is placed in it as well. Wait a minute, let me get this one first. Exactly. It becomes an allegory when Jesus didn't come back. Do you think the idea of debt slavery led to Jim Crow laws making punishments into forms of slavery? I would say not so much the Jim Crow laws, but the incarceration of people by utilizing Jim Crow laws. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Can you explain how Cain versus Abel was really just agricultural versus sheep herding? See, that's a good point. When people realize that there's a failure with the idea of Cain and Abel being actual real people. Now, 500 years ago, Cain and Abel were real people. 1,000 years ago, they were real people. 2,000 years ago, Cain and Abel, real people. They believed in them to be real people. 3,000 years ago, they believed that they were real people. But as that story fails, because, you know, Cain kills Abel, Seth is then born. Out of Seth's line, you get Noah. Noah on the boat, destroyed. The whole planet is destroyed. Noah has 3 sons. From those 3 sons, you get the Israelite people out of Shem. They believe that those are real people, not just groups of agriculturalists and animal husbandry. So when the story fails, as far as them being real people, now we got to make them into something else. But I don't think it's a story talking about sheep herders and all that. You can use it as an allegory for that, which just means that this God prefers dead animals be sacrificed to him instead of some fruits and vegetables. He'd rather kill a sentient being instead of a less sentient being of fruits and vegetables. And I think I was answering that, Evelyn, Paula. Not still Evelyn. The A at the end is throwing me off. Because the more scientifically advanced we become, the more these stories have to be not taken literally. You see? So before, when they thought that the sun went under the earth, and when they thought the earth was flat, and they thought that the rain only came because the windows in heaven were open and all that sort of thing, they're gods. And these stories, they take them literally, that we're having a drought, we need some rain, let's sacrifice some animals, and maybe God will open the windows of heaven and let the waters from above pour out of the firmament, pour through the firmament. But then, as we learn that rain comes from cloud accumulation, oh, those were just allegories. Their drought wasn't caused because of a God, it was caused because of weather patterns. So the more we know, the more we learn, the more these stories have to become allegories and things of that nature. And that's happened throughout all times with every culture. Here's something funny. I normally wouldn't even pay attention to this person, and I'm not even going to read their question, their statement. But I guarantee, I can bet money, he wasn't here for none of the conversation about Joseph. I bet you he wasn't here for none of the conversation, because there's no way he would have resisted not saying anything through this whole thing, because this man does not have a life. He's missing some love in his life or something. Well, I could say probably what I think and why he is the way he is, but you know, he escaped from his little bitty ass town. You know, oftentimes people from a backwards ass town have a backwards ass mentality. I'm gonna leave him alone. Why did Abel raise sheep? Weren't all humans supposed to be vegans at that time frame? No. People been eating meat long before this story ever happened. But in a sense, if you were basing it on the Bible, then you would say, well, they were vegans while they were in the garden, but once they got kicked out of the garden, then they started eating meat because this guy killed some animals in order to clothe Adam and Eve. I know, right, Sean? For a Christian, old D'Angelo shows a lot of hatred. He got a lot of hate in his heart, man. I don't know. He got a lot of hate in his heart. Don't blame him, blame his baby. Yeah, he got a little Napoleon, even though Napoleon wasn't short, but he got a little Napoleon complex. Prove it. Prove it. Prove there's one creator. Prove that there is a creator. Prove it. You can't. You say that I can't run from that. And my name is spelled Larenzo. You say I can't run from that. But prove that there is your God is the God. Prove that Jesus is a savior. Prove it. Love for you to prove it. You know what, Isaac? I just thought about that. You are absolutely right. According to the Bible, we didn't eat meat until after the flood. Because, yes. So, was he doing animal husbandry simply so that this guy can have a blood sacrifice? Because before, it is after the flood when this guy supposedly tells Noah that just like I gave you every fruit and vegetables from the field to eat, every plant from the field to eat, now I give you all the animals as well. So you actually got a good point there. When I do the Noah breakdown story, that's one of the subject matters we're going to break down in the webinar that we're having on May 4th. Shameless plug. Yeah, I've noticed that he does that. He waits till after the live to start saying stuff because he knows that he has absolutely zero points that he can make. You know, small town, small person, small mind. Now, that's not true for everybody from a small town, but it's certainly true for him. Now, who's your savior? Prove. I didn't say Jesus. I said prove your creator, prove your savior. I don't care what religion, prove it. Who is your savior? Who is your God Almighty, your creator? Who is it? And prove that they exist. According to what this God said to Noah, no. Abel didn't eat meat. Cain ate. I mean, Adam, Eve, all the other sons and daughters, Cain, Abel, Seth. None of Cain's descendants. None of Seth's descendants until Noah did they eat meat. You know, when I was growing up in Marietta was still kind of a small knit town back then, even though it was a suburb of Atlanta. They used to say that about rap music. Who is the one? What him name is? Who this one? We needs to know. And gave you a throne. You got a throne? Man, I have a throne. I go to it every morning, afternoon, and evening. I go to the throne. I'm just playing. Oh man, my throat hurt. I didn't eat that much dairy, so I don't know why I'm having this. Must be some flour that I'm not used to here in San Antonio. Right. He wasted. There's no. And yeah, think about it. It must have been some animals that went extinct if they started eating meat. I mean, hell, he had that big ass barbecue right after the flood. And like one of the things that we're going to talk about on this webinar is the fact that first the impossibility of being able to get all those animals on there that he claimed to have gotten on there, and then how the numbers are different. But if you have 2 lions and you let them off the boat and you got 2 gazelle, well, shit, the lions can't wait for the gazelle to produce at a large enough numbers before they eat again in order to not kill off a whole bunch of animals. Oh, Robert's one of those guys. Robert says that are you the savior? Or are you like the forebearer? You're the forebearer of the savior? You Jim Jones and me? You Jim Jones and us, man? You trying to Jim Jones us? According to the story, Noah didn't have any daughters. He only had the 3 sons. The 3 sons had their wives, And then they only mentioned sons that were born of those three dudes, and they might have said they had some daughters as well. But some incest. They love their incest in the Bible, so you got to have some incest. And you are absolutely right, sir. Noah never existed. This story is truly based off of the Sumerian and Akkadian stories. I think that they are the people who say that if we evolved from apes, why are there still apes? Are people demonstrating that whether you agree or disagree with evolution, they don't understand evolution and how it works. So when I come across them, I try to explain how evolution works, but when they are still stupid, I just let them stew in their stupidity. Because it becomes stupidity and not ignorance at that point. Right, and these two comments match. They had to make the numbers higher because somebody noticed that they made sacrifices to Yahweh with only 2 of each kind, and they would be killing off the whole species. And they didn't have good proofreaders and editors back then. If you like to join my cult, then join me in 2027. I'm not going to give you the exact date of 2027, but then I'm going to walk through the East Gate. I'm going to sit at the table with the Lord and have the meal. And then you will see that I sit on the throne with God and the Savior, the Lord. So join the cult of Robert Ben David Jr. So it takes time to genetically grow lions and tigers. They were also last on the list with dinosaurs. Right, so you grow all the other animals first that eat the grass, and then you start growing the lions. Boy, y'all killing me. Is there a Greek tribe included in the 12 tribes? No. So according to especially Hebrew Israelites, but according to the Hebrew text, the Greeks would have come from the tribe. They would have come from Japheth. They claim that the Europeans all come from Japheth. The Israelites come from Shem, and the African Asiatic people come from Ham. But as far as the 12 tribes are concerned, no. But then they go back and they'll say that the Europeans came from Esau. So they show the contradiction within their own story when they try to claim that Esau, who is the progenitor in their book of the Edomites, and the Edomites become the white people, the Europeans. So is it Esau and the Edomites, or is it Japheth? Therein lies the contradiction. It's gone. The coffee is gone. So you know what that means. You know what that means. Are you youngin? Are you young? The dude used to go by youngin, whatever, young something. because he say the same stuff that you're saying, and he already got his millions. You say that like that matters to me. I don't care. What does that matter? Like, why is that a badge of honor? Right. The tribe of Dan is also supposed to be a seafaring people. But according to the Bible story, Japheth's sons and daughters were seafarers as well. And that's why they say that they were the Europeans. And there's what? You got about, is it a 2,000 year difference? About a 2,000 year difference between Noah and, it's supposed to be about a 2,000 year difference between Noah and, is it 2,000 years? Let's see, 4,000 something, 25,000 something. No, so it would be about 1,000 years difference between them. I don't know who you calling a Hamite. I'm not a son of Ham. There's no Israelite in my family. No Israelite DNA in my body. But yeah, I mean, that's where there's so many contradictions in this Bible. Because on one hand, you can claim Dan. I see how that claim can be made. But then you got the Japheth claiming to have made the Europeans. But you also got the Esau and the Edomites making the Europeans. So you got three different lines of people that, depending upon someone's narrative, they could claim them to be the Europeans. This book has so many contradictions within it. And mainly because, like what you were saying earlier about the J text, the P text, the D text, and the E text, you got so many hands in the pot, so many cooks in the kitchen, and they all claim to be making some good spaghetti for the flying spaghetti monster on Saturn, but yet this one is making bolognese. This one has just got sauce and noodles. And this one over here, shit, they made fettuccine. And on this note, I'm getting ready to end the show tonight. So the biblical Israelites had three sports: killing, looting, and rewording. Exactly. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys tremendously. I'm going to end the show tonight. I look forward to tomorrow's show. I have no idea what we're going to be talking about right now. I thought about talking about, because I was going to talk about tonight. Thought about talking about that. What's that dude named in Atlanta? What's it? His initials spell Pam. Anthony Mitchell. Something Anthony Mitchell. And the stupid ass comments he made. But I look forward to tomorrow night's show. All praise be to the flying spaghetti monster on Saturn, the great Parmesan wheel. So y'all have a great night. And always remember, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good money, somebody wrote, coach people with money don't brag about it. Exactly. Good journey, good vibrations.